I'm very honored to have with us online. We have Magnus Björsne. Hello, Magnus.
Hey.
Hey, there you are. Magnus from AstraZeneca, who is the CEO of the Bioventure Hub. I will let you introduce your topic yourself, but I would like to say a few words about you, Magnus. Magnus, you have a PhD and an MBA, and you have graduated from the University of Lund in 1989, which I think is a very, very good university, since I graduated there myself as well. So, excellent. You have an impressive career, I must say, within the medical and the research area. And since 2014, you have been running the AstraZeneca BioVenture Hub, which is a new approach to open innovation, which allows smaller biotechs and academia groups to work closely together. And I think you are co-located within the AstraZeneca area in Mölndal, or yeah, true. So, Magnus, please take us through the perfect storm. So,
thank you. So let's start with defining the way, and thank you for the opportunity, by the way. This is the first time I actually speak at the software conference, so I hope I will manage. If we look at the Swedish life science industry, the way it is defined today, it is composed of some 42,000 people located in roughly 3,000 different companies. It is an export of 110 billion Swedish kronor every year. And I think if we look forward, I think that the definition of the life science industry will dramatically change. So what I intend to talk about is basically the impact of Industry 4.0 on the pharmaceutical industry and on life science as a whole. And I think it's prudent to start with a disclaimer here. So in case you agree with my thinking, it is a statement from AstraZeneca. If you disagree, it's a personal reflection. So let's kick this off with a slide I used 5 years ago, which was basically a survey made by The Economist, where they tried to understand the possible economic impact on digitalization on different businesses. And as you could see, life science and healthcare really stands out. And there was a lot of debate in what way this actually would impact the industry. And if we now look 5 years later, what has actually happened? So if we start with science, today we are as an industry pursuing the next way of disruptive biology. A lot of this is because we are harnessing the growing potential of genomic data. And it's really about increasing our understanding of disease on the molecular level. And this is really opening up new avenues to new therapeutic platforms and technologies. The second thing, which I think is going through an immense amount of change, is basically world and society. And just as an example, between 2001 and 2020, it is believed that chronic diseases will have increased by 57%. And you can just imagine the impact this will have on the cost of healthcare. If we then look on patients, which I think to some extent is neglected in a sense that the power they exercise is becoming more and more important. And this is to a great extent enabled by technology, where patients are becoming more engaged. They are much more willing to take control over their own health and of treatment choices. And digital technology is really putting a vast amount of information in the hands of patients, and it empowers them to play a larger role in managing their own health. So you could argue that care is shifting from being reactive and acute to proactive and chronic, both as a consequence of new science, but also due to the effect of technology itself. If we look then finally on the digital component of this, it is really exercising an enormous change in our industry. And we have heard some about it. And what I think is interesting is that it actually brings different sectors closer together, because we need to work together in very, very different ways. And the title of my seminar is The Perfect Storm. And the reason for this is that what we are facing at the moment is really a huge pull from the outside. And this is a pull not only from payers, more importantly, it's a pull from patients. This is combined with an enormous push from technology. And this taking all together has really catalyzed change in our industry at the speed which we have never seen before. And a few words about the way it impacts business. So this is research done by various basically consultancy firms, and I think they were correct. This is from 2016. And what they claim is that we will see 4 different types of players in the life science businesses. The first one is called lean innovators, and these guys are basically the companies that used to be the generic companies, those who basically make a living out of selling off-patent medicines. We are now past the patent cliff, and that business model is no more viable. So instead, they are becoming what is called lean innovators, which is really about super efficient manufacturing, super relentless cost management, logistics, and what have you. And it is a really important player in the whole ecosystem. If we move on to what is called around the patient innovators, this is basically where a company like AstraZeneca sits. It will still be about meeting high unmet medical needs. It will be about innovation when it comes to medicines, but it will not be enough. It will also be about adjacent services and analytics, and it will really be about new product economics, and I will come back to that. The third category of companies are what is called value innovators, which in short is companies that focus on integrating existing technology. I think we see a lot of this, especially from Asia, and it has proven super efficient. The fourth category is the so-called new health digitals, which is either health companies that go digital or digital companies that go into health. And here, for example, Google, I guess, is a good example, IBM as well. So what does this then mean? Well, in essence, we are talking about going from sick care to health care. And if we then start to think about what that means from the perspective of innovation, we talked about that care is shifting from reactive to acute. And what we today talk about is innovation beyond the pill. So we are basically in the industry redefining the whole definition of what we mean with innovation. This, of course, requires a lot of different skills. It requires different technologies. It even requires different type of cultures than we are used to handle in our industry. As an example, I think the pharma industry is by far one of the most experienced sectors when it comes to collaborations in order to fuel innovation. But if you consider the time perspective it takes to develop a medicine, and you imagine a situation where we approached an ICT companies and asked for a collaboration and tell them it will take another 10 years to reach the market. All we know is that whatever technology they are pursuing, it will probably be obsolete when we are finished. So the old ways of doing collaborations and business arrangements doesn't really work here because the business logics do not marry. So we are facing a situation where we not only need to develop new type of products, we also need to develop new type of legal arrangements and new type of patterns for collaborations. And since we are talking about basically sector convergence, it means that we will partner up increasingly with multiple stakeholders. So the whole legal framework of bilateral legal arrangements will no longer be valid. We need to create new ways of creating those legal frameworks, which is super challenging. And there is even a research area today, which is about using blockchain technology to create legal arrangements. So everything is put upside down. If we look on diagnostics, will totally change the way medicine is used and when it is used. And it is all driven by data, machine learning, and AI. The treatments themselves we are today talking about the digital therapeutics, where you basically treat and monitor the patient with the same regime. This was unheard of only 5 years ago. We talk about post-treatment, and we talk even about wellness. We are today, or yesterday, however you express it, facing and working with a business model that is 100 years old. We are basically selling a product that the customer doesn't want. And what I mean with that is that we are in the hardware business selling pills. If you are a patient, what you desire is health, not per se a pill. And this is changing. So the whole industry is moving towards healthcare rather than sick care. And a bit thought-provoking. So what if we suddenly no longer should deal with products? We will become service and solution providers of health. It's no more about simple hardware. It is a combination of all things, not at least ICT related matters. We are facing a situation where the whole economics of the business is changing. So today, the industry get paid per product. What we are facing now is a situation where we will get paid per outcome, i.e. what value do we deliver to society? You could just start to imagine how that will change what type of data we need to measure when we do clinical trials. We are moving away from discussing proof of concept to discussing proof of value. We are increasingly dismissing isolated applications and really are looking across different industry verticals with both opportunities and challenges that mean. COVID, I think, has made us ask ourselves, how dependent should we be on global processes versus creating independence in order to a larger extent rely on regional value chains? We are going away from standalone companies to becoming orchestrators of networks. So this whole philosophy and effect of sector convergence is really starting to impact strategies to a great extent. We also see an increasing importance of what I call sector agnostic platforms. Quantum computing is equally valuable to the automotive industry as it is to life science. So what does that mean with respect to new ways of collaborating? So if we look a bit on the actual consequences here, to summarize, so we are going from a shift where the patient will become much, much more central than the payer. The definition of customer will change. We will need expertise from outside our own sector, which plays a lot of different impacts, whatever you call it. Everything from business to culture to skill base that is needed to happen in universities and wherever. The whole role of exclusivity is changing. We don't need ownership of rights to certain technologies that we need in the future. And this is from a business that has been totally dependent on patents. Suddenly, patents will become much less important because it will be about how you combine that knowledge, which is uniqueness, rather than the isolated components themselves. We need to work with test cycles in a very, very different way. I mean, we can't do like Spotify to put out a new product and test it in 24 hours when we have 15 years development times. So we need to increase the bandwidth and be clever with respect to how we can invent new way of testing hypotheses given the regulatory framework we are operating within. Technology, we have talked about that, but it really is about changing to flex because the options we face are much huger today than they were yesterday. So we need to find new ways of dealing with innovation itself. We talked about talent. So if we take a few minutes and look, you have all seen this. It is Moore's law. It was introduced in 1965, and it describes the process of the speed by which technology happens. But if you look on management of innovation, what has happened? Well, we had the Industrial Revolution, the conveyor belt, Toyota's lean manufacturing, and today people talk about agility. But if you look in large organization, what has been promoted is really the skills that is needed to optimize productivity and processes and systems. That type of innovation management will probably not be as important in the future, because we will optimize a factory better with machine learning than with experience. So there is a culture shift where we suddenly realize that we must pay much more attention to orchestrating creativity and innovation rather than being experts in process optimization. And today, we use digital technology to differentiate and improve existing products. We use it to advance R&D and clinical trial practice. But where we yet have a bit to go is when it comes to integrating all these different industry verticals into total new innovations. And this is what really is driving business model evolution today. We need to find new ways of partnering and new ways of creating these type of innovation. And this will, as we all know, lead to a total new definition of healthcare itself. The challenge we are dealing with is basically that every regulation and every mantra is based on what was relevant yesterday. So how can we jointly as a community work with changing both the regulatory perspective? We need to get rid of the scarcity of caretakers to work with industry, because we need to work much more integrated in delivering this future together. And a big part of this is the challenge of exploitation versus exploration. So exploitation is doing what we do today even better, and it is very short term. Exploration is doing today what we need to know tomorrow. And this is a huge challenge if you are in a market economy. So we really need to try to be innovative also in how we do things, not only what we do. And that brings us to what we are trying to do within AstraZeneca. And I want to spend 30 seconds just mentioning this. We have built the physical environment where we basically are bringing together different industry verticals into the same environment, where we today have some 30 companies co-located with AstraZeneca. And what they have in common is that none of them are competitors on a product level. So it's about creating non-competitive complementarity or synergy, whatever you choose to call it, where there is an overlap with respect to knowledge and technology, but not with respect to commercial interests. And this really allows us to share knowledge and data and what have you in a very different way than we are used to. So what we have done in essence is to build an environment where we mix different type of science with different type of technology, different type of knowledge and different type of culture, all with the purpose to catalyze innovation, because that is really what all this is about. And when we are redefining what we mean with innovation, it suddenly becomes very unpredictable. And what we do today when we partner is to build business case, which is basically estimating return on investment. That means that you have predicted the outcome of the relation even before it starts. And I don't think that is a good way to engage in disruptive innovation. We need to find new patterns and new mechanisms to innovate jointly in a network that requires total new skills than what we see today. And this is where I will end. And basically, I hope I have made you rethink what we mean with innovation and what the consequences are with respect to how we need to work together. And I think we also need to realize that we are all sitting in the same boat here. Nobody can achieve this by themselves. So with that, I intend to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Magnus. That was extremely interesting, I must say. And hearing you talk about how we should collaborate and how we should work together, I mean, I'm standing today here at Lindholmen Science Park, which is a living proof of companies working together. And so we have tried this for a long time, maybe in other parts of the industry as well. But just a question first. I mean, you talk about there is non-competition, there is a lot of collaboration, but going back, you said it before. I think you mentioned the word like we're off the patent cliff or something like that. But I mean, how about saving IPs or saving what you made money of before? How do you find the business model in this collaboration?
No, I think at least for the big pharma companies, we will still be dependent on the active ingredient, as to speak, the medicine. But we will need sensor technology. We will need blockchain technology to communicate data. We don't need exclusivity on those things. The more they are used, the better it is. So we can start to co-create and co-develop innovation without being too concerned about whether we own it or not, which allows us to work with other type of companies today to basically create win-win scenarios where 1 + 1 always will be more than 2, because we are not competitors when it comes to our part of the total innovation, as to speak. This is where I think we need to be more creative.
I fully agree on that. I think it's very interesting as well, because I mean, you draw a lot of parallels to what we've seen in other parts of the industry. You talk about going from product to going to service, for instance, hardware to
So Ulf, a funny thing is that I recently learned that Volvo Cars have started a healthcare division, life science division. I mean, imagine, no, it's true. Imagine using the car as a huge sensor for vital signs. 10 years ago, it was taken out of the question.
Where they use the toilet as a sensor.
Yeah. Well, I prefer the car, but that's another story. But I mean, 10 years ago, you couldn't imagine AstraZeneca collaborating with Volvo Cars. Today, it is a reality.
Yeah. Talking a little bit, you talked about automotive now. We have a question here from the audience as well. Eric and said, I mean, we talk a lot about preventive maintenance in the industry and being able to, I would say, change parts before they break. Is that something that you can apply into the health service as well? Maybe not changing parts, but I mean, can you use the data to foresee health issues and be able to stop them in advance using this collaboration with the other companies here as well?
Yeah, it's a super relevant question, and I think it's spot on. I mean, if I look back on our strategy in diabetes 10 years ago, it was all about lowering and controlling glucose. Today, we are saying we want to make diabetes disappear. So I think putting that in the perspective of the questions, the best way to lower healthcare cost is, of course, to prevent the disease totally. But I think it's interesting with life science, because we all know that if you live healthier, you don't smoke, you don't drink alcohol, you sleep your 8 hours, you exercise, disease will go down. But humanity doesn't work that way. But I think we are striving towards that scenario, which means that we are by ourselves becoming Kodiak. I mean, the business will disappear. But I think that's okay, because there will always be a need for healthcare. But the way it is delivered will change, and the meaning of it will change. But it's still healthcare.
Thank you for that answer. Talking about, I mean, if you discuss like public healthcare in Sweden, maybe digital innovation is not the word that I would use as the main describer of public healthcare, and the fast changes that happens in the business now, and I mean, and then look at the public healthcare. I mean, where you have not even the different regions cannot talk to each other because the EMR systems are separated. How do you extract the data out of make sure you have availability when it's so silo-based set up?
I think there are two perspectives of this. I mean, if you work in a large organization, it doesn't. You go where it's best to be, as to speak. So in one way, I'm worried about that. The way we are setting things up today doesn't make us competitive for the future. If you're a smaller company in Sweden today, you may not have the same type of options as a company like AstraZeneca has to go elsewhere. And I'm just worried that we are hampering our own innovation ability by not securing that the system promotes both development of innovation, but also adaptation of new innovation. So I think we are too short-term cost driven today, and we see that clinical trials go down in Sweden. A lot of those underlying, the fuel for innovation is slowly becoming less attractive, I argue, for a lot of different reasons. And I think this is where we really need to get together and discuss this from a system perspective rather than from a case-to-case perspective. And with the mentality we have in the Nordics, I think we are probably best suited in the world to fix this. But it's not happening, and it really makes me wake up early in the morning sometimes.
Thank you. I agree on that one. I think we need to really stress the drive for innovation. But then the question, I mean, you have set up this Bioventure Hub and been there for a while. Did you the reason for doing that, was that to improve the innovation capability of AstraZeneca, and you felt the need to kind of isolate it from the company to drive innovation outside of it, or do you have this as a separate entity, the Bioventure Hub, and then you still drive a lot of innovation inside the company as well? Do you understand the question?
How much time do I have?
You have roughly 2 minutes on that one.
2 minutes. No, but there are multiple reasons behind this. One is, of course, if industry in general can contribute to strengthen the ecosystem they operate within, it will be a benefit to the industry itself. That's a no-brainer. I also think it boils down to, you could even call it sustainability. If you look at the infrastructure and human capital that sits with the industry and how it is used, if you can avoid repeating an experiment, that has a big impact on environment and the whole dimension of sustainability. I also think that it is about exposing ourselves to the entrepreneurial culture that we now see is embedded within our own organization. So there are multiple drivers here, but none of them have been about short-term monetary aspects. It's all about trying to put one more piece into the puzzle when it comes to how we deal with innovation. And I really believe in I mean, we have seen this during these last 6 months that, yes, you can work remote, but ideas and creativity is not something you do on a Teams meeting. You need to meet people, and meeting people from totally different sectors with totally other type of ideas. It simply catalyzes innovation. It's no rocket science.
I agree on that. That's a thought we've discussed as well. I mean, now as we have the situation where everybody is working remote, I think the day-to-day work is done in a very efficient way. But as you say, fueling innovation and creating new ideas is a little bit hampered when you don't meet and you work together on that one. So
we have actually measured it, and it's not just a guess. It's a proof.
You have data on it as well. Even better than. As we've talked about data all day, so it's really, it's not good, but it's good that you measure it at least. You said, Magnus, before that you have never spoken at the software conference before, but now you are here at the software conference. So I need to ask you a software question as well, because we've received that from Ossa here online as well. And so do you see a trend of increasing embedded software within medical devices? And what about new regulations when it comes to that, and cybersecurity and all about it?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we have tons of programs in that area. It's both with respect to adding it on to existing products to make them more safe and more efficient and what have you, to totally new solutions. It's going all over what we do. And I don't think people know how much ICT there is within a company like AstraZeneca today. It's an enormous, impressive activity that is going on, but that's not what we are known for. So I think we have a communication challenge here.
Yeah. So would you describe yourself as a software company?
No, I describe ourselves as a healthcare company, but the definition of what we mean with a healthcare company is maybe changing.
Okay, good. You said also that you're not applying the Spotify method with testing new technology within 24 hours, and I really thank you for that, because that could have been tough. So by that, Magnus, thank you very much for a very inspiring and interesting talk. We are running out of time, so I have to kind of wrap this up right now.
Yeah,
so once
my
again,
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we have heard here today, I mean, it's all about data. It's about managing data. It's about taking care of the data, using AI, using how we transform data into information, and use that to make to inform decisions. How we go digital in healthcare, it's a necessity. As we started off, we said we have an aging population. We had increasing cost, and we need to take care of that. And by using technology, that's a way to mitigate this and take us into the future. And guess where we will be in 2033? Who lives will know. And right now we will take a short break, and we will be back at 2:30 with the next session. So thank you very much for attending the MedTech track, and we'll meet again in 6 minutes.